Hi guys, welcome back to yet another review. And the first thing before I actually get started is I want to apologize to Isaiah and to Symphony Ears. I bought this IM from him a couple of months ago already, and at the time I did the review, and I was completely and totally convinced that I had uploaded the video. As my last couple of months have also been a little bit of an up and down roller coaster, I wasn't attentive to actually have seen if the video had been uploaded. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I thought I had uploaded the video. I did not upload the video. My apologies to Isaiah. And so I decided to redo the video, especially because, and I only actually came to figure this out now because while preparing for a new review, and I wanted to actually check out the previous review. I couldn't find it, and then lo and behold, it was in my videos to be uploaded. And well, anyway, this is the Symphony Years Hexad. It's Isaiah's or Symphony Years interpretation of what a 2+4 AM is to them, or is to him rather. So you could think of it as his take on his version of a Blessing 3, if you want to put it that way. It's again following on the basic principles of his first IM, the Tetrad, which I reviewed and I thoroughly enjoyed, which is fully custom hand built by himself to a quality which is quite enviable. Especially when I say again, I consider not only his age, but the quality that he's been able to obtain here with everything, with the resin, with the, I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. He has chosen for this particular take two of those biofilm drivers that he used in the Tetrad, but now in this very visible kind of quasi isobaric configuration. So both drivers are firing into a center, let's say, chamber, which then exits through that tube there. It's one of the tubes. There's three of them. It then uses two Sonyan BAs for the mids and two Knowles BA, sorry, for the highs. So the quality of the hardware is there. The quality of the build is there as well. The cable is a nice cable. It brings some KZ Starline tips, which, let me tell you, work phenomenally well with this IM. I really didn't see any need to change it to another tip. It brings as well this nice case. All of it's for $275, which falls within what is the price of similar IMs and the price of the Blessing 3 and everything. You could argue, oh, but he's a small boutique brand. He's a nobody. I'm afraid to buy from him, and so on and so forth. Well, what I can say from my experience with Isaiah is that he's a serious audiophile, serious individual as a human being. There's absolutely nothing that he leaves unturned to make sure that his products come out exemplary. At this particular unit, when he was making it for me, he was careful enough to actually send me the graphs for me to see the left and right channel, that they were perfectly matched and so on and so forth, which I then confirmed when I got. So I have absolutely nothing but praise to say about him, which is not what can be said about bigger brands. Fair enough, bigger scale, that maybe doesn't even allow you to have this sort of attention to your clientele, but the truth is this: he's doing things in the way that I believe should be done, and in the way that you should ultimately treat your clients. If you are a big company, you then create the means to be able to give this sort of level of attention and professionalism. But considering that he's a one-man show, he does a phenomenal job, and my hats off to him. Anyway, going on to the Hexad into a little bit more detail. There's obviously traces of his, let's say, preferred signature, his style of tuning. So there's definitely some DNA here which is coming from the Tetrad, but And the Tetrad, for those that don't know, is a 1+3. It uses a the single dynamic driver, the same as this one here, and then it uses BAs also from Sony and Knowles, but of different models and one BA less basically. But in the Hexad, he's obviously pushed the bar up, improved upon the original tuning that he went for, which was a very neutral tuning. And gave us or gives us an IM which has, in my opinion, or the closest, or the for lack of a better comparison, the IM that immediately jumped to mind when I heard it was the H60 from ISN, and I think that in itself as well is already probably the best praise that I can give Isaiah and the Hexad. And why do I say this? Well, first of all, because those of you that follow me know that I'm a big fan of ISM. I am particularly a big fan of the H60. I think the H60 alongside the Voltage and the EBC 80 are some of the best IMs that Pnon and ISN have released. And the similarities between these two IMs in particular, both of them are 2+4s. The only difference here is that they are using two 8mm silicon diaphragm drivers here, while it's here two biofilm drivers. Otherwise, also 4 BAs. Everything is very similar, the same sort of base configuration, a quasi-isobaric, two drivers facing a center channel. Everything is very similar. And the similarity of the sound between one and the other is so big that, you know, there is no doubt in the back of my mind that if you are a fan of the H60, you will be a fan of this. Obviously, the H60 is a little bit more expensive. It's $349. So we're talking a premium of roughly $75. With that, is there anything extra that it brings that the Hexad doesn't bring? In reality, no. You're just buying a product which is coming from a bigger brand, maybe a better cable, maybe a few more tips, but ultimately it's basically the same thing for a difference of $70. And the difference of the price, in my opinion, is very well justified. I'm not by any means saying that this is inferior to that, or that this is better than that. No, I am saying that if for some reason, you know, you cannot stretch out as far as what the ISN costs, and you want to get, in essence, I would say 95% of the sound of the H60, the Hexad is definitely a solid choice or a solid alternative, with the following things to keep in mind. There is a slight difference in the sort of bass that one and the other gives, and I think it's down to two factors. First of all, 10mm drivers, 8mm drivers, and then perhaps some inherent quality of the actual drivers themselves. And what all of that translates to, so that you guys can in practical terms understand what I'm trying to say, is that in terms of overall bass depth and bass extension, equal. The bass on the H60 sounds ever so slightly snappier than the bass on the Hexad. Is that worse? Is that bad? Is that better? Look, it's down to your personal taste. I personally think that both of them are capable of bass performance which is perfectly suited with my liking. And because the rest of then the frequency range and the materials being used then matches that sort of bass signature difference that exists, they are both perfect in my book. So I can't really say that one is better than the other. And then the other thing that also the H60 has ever so slightly more than the Hexad is a little bit more extension up top. So I'm talking a little bit more of twinklies and sparklies, but again, nothing significant, nothing huge. When I started in the beginning of this review by saying that this sounds very similar to the H60, it's because it's precisely that. I'm talking, I would say, considering my library, I would say that they sounded basically the same 93 to 95% of the times. And those few percent that it didn't sound the same, it was songs that I really know well, and where then I could notice just a little bit more twinklies and sparklies there, a little bit of a snappier bass there than over here. But the reality is that didn't mean I preferred the H60 over the Hexad. No, what I'm basically saying, and again I'm repeating myself, is that if this is a sort of sound that you like, since there are a few units out there and people have already talked extensively about the H60, then it is a guarantee that the sound of the Hexad will please. Jumping into the sound into with regards to a little bit more detail, as I said, the bass performance is phenomenal. It is a bass which is clean, detailed, capable of resolving complex passages. I mean, anything from, let's say, Ocean Breeze by Tim Bowman to Thanks to You by Boz Skaggs to Mr. Chow by Acoustic Alchemy. There was really nothing that I threw at it that it wasn't capable of handling. There were then those occasional songs here and there, something like, for example, and I'll give you the examples of where you could notice the bass on the H60 being ever so slightly more snappy. House of Groove by Eugene Groove, the bass here was just a little extra snappier. Let me see here. From Dusk to Dawn by George Duke, again, the bass here was just a little bit snappier, a little bit, ever so slightly cleaner. But otherwise, phenomenal. So bass is not an issue. Then both of them have that very relaxed pinna gain. With it kind of peaking closer or around 4K in one and the other. So both IEMs peak at around the same frequency. And what that relaxed pinna gain allows for is a warmer, more organic, more musical presentation, where ultimately, of course, the balance of bass is important in dictating how the mids will sound, if they are clean or muddy. And because that balance has been perfectly struck, the mids on the Hexad are absolutely phenomenal, just like on the H60. I mean, that's one of the things that has always impressed me about Panon's house sound, is how they make the mid sound so amazing, even when on graph you look at it and you think, oh my god, with this amount of bass it's going to sound wrong, and they always pull it off. That's the reality. Even things like the H30 and the H40, they always have this phenomenal mid vocal frequency response, which is just incredible. And the Hexad, like the H60, they both are ticking that box. Extension as well, very nicely done. I would say the extension, compared with the rest of the frequency range, is probably the area where the Hexad is maybe a little bit tamer, or maybe not on the same level. But I think the way that Isaiah did the tuning here was already on purpose, so as not to have that typical BA timbre and that typical BA sheen that sometimes you start having with the higher frequencies. And in that aspect, that's the one thing that again is very impressive, because you listen to the Hexad and it sounds like a single driver. There's a perfect cohesion between all of the drivers. There's no separation of the sound in terms of you saying, okay, this is coming from the DD, this is coming from the BA. Everything just sounds as one solid wall of music, and that is something which I just have to absolutely praise. That's the reality. That's a proof of a well done tuning, and that's exactly what you have on the H60. The H60 and the voltage, if you listen to them, that's one of the things that immediately impresses you. And I mean, I'm a fan of Panon and ISN, so I can maybe be sounding like I'm shilling it, but no, that it really is truly impressive. And when you're listening to music, there you is where you actually see how good or how capable an IEM can be. Let's see here another song that you guys might Stand By Me by Dominic Phil Aim. Incredible performance of the Hexad. I mean, just absolutely phenomenal. Piano in the Dark by Brenda Russell, again, absolutely incredible. Another song which really impressed me on the Hexad was Japanese Roots by Takedake. I hope I'm saying that correct. It's one of those wow songs, seriously, one of those wow songs. And it's a song that also on the H60 and a few other IEMs really impressed me. And when I listened to it, and it's a song that I use, when I listened to it on the Hexad, I was expecting good things, because up to that point, everything that I had listened to so far was impressing me. But when I listened to the Japanese Roots on the Hexad, I was totally convinced. Top marks for the Hexad, a phenomenal sounding IEM. In terms of its technical capabilities, I would say that it's not that they are not or that it's not capable. It's not that it hasn't got good detail retrieval or good soundstage or good imaging or good resolution. No, it has. I would say timbre and tonality and soundstage are probably the two strongest characteristics of the Hexad, with imaging and detailed retrieval then being secondary. And again, all of this is down to the fact that Isaiah tuned this to be musical. It's about the music. It's about being a pleasure to listen to. And that's something that many times it's kind of forgotten. It's kind of just make an IM, push it out the door. And even in a discussion that I was having recently, I mentioned that, IEMs today have become copy-paste. It's basically copy-paste. It's basically copy-paste. So when you get something like this, that has done enough to stand out, it has to be praised, it has to be mentioned, it has to be, let's say, brought out so that people can know, yes, this is something that is different. This is an IEM that really stands out in the sea of IEMs, which are basically just copy-paste of each other. The H60 is one of those other IEMs that also falls into that category. It's an IEM it's well tuned. The same perhaps cannot be said about some other products that even Panon and ISN make, and Tansio Mirai make, where that copy-paste philosophy really starts coming out a lot. But that ends up happening more down to the fact that people do not ultimately appreciate what a brand is trying to do than anything else. So they kind of fall into the trap of wanting to please what the clients want or what the people want, instead of maintaining themselves ultimately faithful to their house philosophy. I'm not saying that that's what's happening with ISN or with Panon or with Tansio Mirai, but you can definitely see that more and more their latest releases are kind of being very repetitive in what the performance is like. It's a good performance, it stands out definitely, but kind of always very much the same thing. While in the older models that we used to get from them, that distinction in terms of how the tuning was done was there, and every model kind of brought something very unique to the table. Okay, but anyway, that's neither here or there. It's just to basically say that what Symphony Years stands out in my books as an IM that's well built, very well tuned, and that has done enough in my books to be worthwhile a listen. Obviously, being something done in such small numbers, it's not easy to get your hands on, but if you do get your hands on it, trust me, I'm sure that you will be impressed. And definitely by knowing that it sounds, or that it has a sound which is very similar to the H60, I think that enables you guys, or those that are of you that might be interested, to already have that kind of doubt be pushed out of the window straight away. No, you already know what to expect from this. Okay, anyway guys, I'll just quickly show you the graph and we'll wrap it up. Well guys, here's the graph for the Symphony. Here's the Hexad, and as you can see, a nice kind of inoffensive style of graph of tuning. We're talking about a bass gain of roughly 8.5 to 9 dBs, a pinna gain which is very relaxed and very docile in this whole mids to upper mids area, peaking at around 4K. And the way that this 100 hertz point here matches that whole plateau there, which usually I recommend it matching at above 2 kilohertz. The way that this matching is done, and how this whole part of the spectrum of the mids and the upper mids comes across, these peaks in no way are they in affecting or jumping out or anything. Everything just sounds very uniform, and then it's got decent extension past 10K in the main characteristic being that it's non-offensive. It doesn't stand out in a negative way and confers a good soundstage. Usually if this part of the frequency range, depending on how the rest is done, but a good rule of thumb is if this part of the frequency range sits below this part of the mids to upper mids, you are going to be guaranteed a nice big soundstage. That's kind of the premise, a very natural sounding big soundstage. When this part here is more energetic, it doesn't mean that big soundstage isn't present, but that soundstage may come across at times as being a little bit colored, a little bit fake. Okay, an IM that comes to mind is, for example, the Kinera Loki. That's a $3,500 IM. I mean, I believe I've got here. Yes, here we go. Actually, I have here the graph. Okay, so this is the Kinera Loki. Let me just match it here with the Hexad. Normalize it at about 500 hertz, and that's an example of what I was saying. The amount of energy that you have above there is quite significant. Yes, loads of twinklies and sparklies and loads of detail up top, and everything is incredible, high resolution, blah blah blah, all of that. But that soundstage can, on occasion, sound just a little bit fake. But it's like I said, it's all also has to do with the balance that's struck between that part of the spectrum and the mids, upper mids, and the bass. And in the Loki, they've done their work as well. The Canaro Loki, yes, is an expensive IM. It's questionable whether or not it's worth its $3,500, but that's a different topic altogether. In terms of its sound, is it well tuned? Does it play incredible? Hell yeah, definitely. Especially when you consider that all the bass performance, which you don't really get a perception of how good it is by the graph, is coming from a 6mm driver and a bone conduction. It's nothing short of absolutely phenomenal. But anyway, this is not about the Canaro Loki, it's about the Hexad. And the Hexad, as you can see, great bass. There's no bleed into the mids. Mids are very, like I like saying, suave, treble, everything phenomenal. And that's exactly why when I was listening to it, the IM that immediately came to mind was the H60, which I'm placing up now. And you can see why. They are very, very similarly tuned. And the difference that exists is basically, like I said, in the bass you have a slightly snappier bass at times. Let me just take away quickly the Hexad, okay? And then the little bit of extra extension that it has up top confers it that little bit more detail here and there in some passages. Otherwise, it's basically, like I said, 93-95 sounding equal. And that, in my opinion, I'm sounding like a broken record, but that, in my opinion, is already, I think, enough testimony to say that the Hexad is a properly tuned IM, and that should be taken into consideration in a serious manner. Okay, another IM, just quickly, that also after listening a couple of times I was also reminded, was curiously another IM from also ISN, which is the H50, which is a 1+4. And again, you can see, first of all, why I also like the H50 so much, because the way that the mids are done. And this is this here that you see here, this way of tuning the mids. Let me take away the Hexad. This way of tuning the mids of them not being forward is a very typical Panon ISN kind of way of tuning the mids. Tensio Mirai usually is the more forward style mids that they have, where you have bigger peaks at 2 to 3K and then they come down. So they're trying to maybe cater for the crowd that likes the more technical sided or the more technical sounding IMs. It's this precisely, and how this somehow magically matches well with the bass performance that the ISN IMs and the Paron IMs has, that makes them sound so incredibly good. And if you were to tell me that, I mean, that's the H60, the H50, if you were to tell me that this was the Hexad was an IM that was tuned by Panon or by ISN, I would say, yeah, totally believe it. I would not in any way, shape or doubt you, because it's got that magic that that they have made a name for themselves by doing. Okay, guys, that's it. If there's any questions, please let me know, and we'll catch you later. Catch you in another review. Take care now. Bye bye.